All right, guys, this is Lewis and Luke. We have decided to do a podcast and we're going to keep them up on a regular basis. In this episode, we are going to be talking about some of the quote unquote difficulties of nutritional balancing science, because we feel like it's going to be helpful for a lot of people that have difficulties or are having difficulties with nutritional balancing. And I can assure you that me and Luke have had our fair share of difficulties on the program. Well, I guess they're not really difficulties in a sense; they're more deeper than that. And hopefully, in this podcast, we're going to be expressing what it truly means to have so-called difficulties on the program, and some ways and means to get over it and to get through it.
All right.
So yeah, I don't know. Do you want to go first, Luke, and share a few things about, what's any difficulties you've had on the program?
Yeah. I can't say that my experiences have been so much of a mental, like spiritual nature as maybe some of your experiences. I know. Like I do know that I have had a lot of clients that experience like ego breakdown and spiritual crisis and things like that. I've experienced minor things like that, maybe like forgiving my mother or like letting go of things like that. But those were usually like temporary, and they were pretty much let go in my dreams. For me, the program has been very about like just realizing how sick my physical body was without me really knowing it. It's weird, like you go about your life and you think you're fairly healthy. Like I ate, eating a pretty good diet, and you think you have like a good energy level and you can think clearly and all these things. But when you actually do the pushing exercise and you start to become more in touch with your body, you begin to realize actually over time just actually how sick your body was. For me, it's just the realization, how much copper was actually in my body and how twisted it was. The untwisting of my body has been a huge theme. And I will actually know when I'm going to retrace an infection by how straight my body feels when I do the pushing exercise. Like if I do the pushing exercise for about like 45 minutes and I feel all of a sudden my body is more aligned than it ever has been, I will all of a sudden get the feeling there'll be pressure or heat or something like that. I feel the energy in a certain spot, and all of a sudden, I will come to the realization that I'm about to retrace an infection in that area as my body untwists. For example, as the left side of my face, heals and, gets uncongested, my lymphs drain, and I retrace infections in my sinus and things like that. And now the energy is pulling my left shoulder blade back, and then I am coughing up mucus that was in my lungs because my left shoulder was too far forward, and as it relaxes it has to decongest that area because it was congested. So for me, for the detwisting, people don't realize how important foot reflexology is. I routinely get sore spots in the same spots on the top of my foot, and as I move energy downwards, the energy gets stuck there, and then I have to rub those spots out for the detwisting to continue. Also, getting periodically adjusted by a chiropractor. I think people sometimes don't realize that one of the reasons they get tired on the program sometimes is, especially if they're doing the pushing exercise, because your body can get kind of stuck. I've realized that my energy will drop, and then my energy will come back up if I get manipulated by a chiropractor, because it's able to overcome like the hump. You know what I mean? It's like my body gets kind of stuck, and they're able to like crack me back into alignment. Also, Rolfing has been excellent for me. Maybe even more so than chiropractic.
Do you do it every week?
No, I do it like once a month or even less. I've been doing it like once every retest, which is for me, it's like every 2 months. And then I do the spinal twist. Honestly, I do the spinal twist. I pop my back into alignment maybe like 8 times a day.
Yeah, I'm the same. Yeah, it's a good habit, really. That
right, and I pop my toes.
To get into.
I pop my toes because I feel the energy gets stuck. I'll pop my toes and my neck like 8 times a day too.
Yeah. How often do you think that you get healing reactions? Is it something that's
like actual like
you can go? Yeah, you know the feeling, like you'll feel good for, two,
Oh,
3 weeks, and then all of a sudden you're gonna feel
for
quite
me, not
bad
that
for a few days.
often.
You're feeling the
Uh,
reaction.
there's been like probably like 4 or 5 major reactions for me, and they were
Mm,
like I was like legitimately sick, where like I had to retrace an ear infection, retrace a sinus infection, retrace like a flu type thing,
mm,
probably like 4 times. And then
okay.
it took me like a week or two to move through it each time.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So when you first began the program, how old was you when you first began?
I was 22.
22. And I suppose throughout your teenage years up to 22, you was feeling relatively okay. Or I know
Right,
that you had a bit of brain fog and stuff.
right. My fog didn't really come about until right before I started the program, and
Mm,
even then, I only had it sometimes, like when I ate a lot of carbohydrates at once,
mm,
or when I didn't have enough sleep. You know what I mean?
mm,
And
mm,
even now, I'll still get like similar symptoms from like candida if especially if I'm not well rested. You know what I mean?
mm,
People
mm.
overlook the basics. Just getting enough sleep really helps your brain fog symptoms. Like people overlook that. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of people start, you know, honestly with the basics and think that they think that it's a bit of a quick fix, so in a few months' time they can go back to staying up late, or they can go back to eating a little bit of sugar and stuff. But it's probably important to realize that the basics should literally stick, for the rest of your life in a sense, so the diet, the sleeping early, the spinal twist, everything that's kind of what we should be doing as humans normally, should be over a prolonged period, um, rather than just, sleeping early for a while and stuff. But
Right.
um,
So yeah, for me, I think with my experience, it's important. Like people realize if you get sick, uh, you're probably retracing. If you're on a full program and especially if you're using the sauna and you get sick, like you're probably retracing. And for me, like I'm intuitive enough to know that it is retracing because, like I said, I can feel it before it comes on.
mm,
And I can feel where my body is usually going to retrace next. You know what I mean?
yeah.
But I always feel stronger afterwards. I always feel more aligned, and my body feels more solid
Mm,
afterwards. Um, so that's important to realize is that even though it may be difficult, you're always gonna feel better afterwards, and it is just a stepping stone on your path towards
mm,
development.
mm.
But in truth, no, I have not had so many like mental things like that. I don't know if it was because I had to mature in certain ways when I was young, or I don't know, or
You
maybe certain souls manifest imbalances in certain ways, so my body just took more of the damage. It's
Yeah.
hard to say.
Because you've been detoxing copper, haven't you, for a while? It's been showing up on your tests. But for
Yeah, I've
you,
been dumping copper
you
for
were
more than
telling
two
me
years.
that copper is it gives you a little bit of insomnia, doesn't it? It gives you a little bit of insomnia and a few weird dreams, but it's not as intense as some people feel it.
No, I feel better when I'm dumping copper sometimes because I'll sleep better and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Lucky you, lucky you. People are in for a treat when it's my turn to tell them about what's been going off.
Yeah, I don't know if that's because you accumulated more copper than me. I don't
Possibly.
know. Uh,
I don't know.
I
I
don't
was
know.
quite a wild teenager, so probably.
Yeah, I was never that wild. Like I would drink and smoke on the weekends, but I was, I usually slept enough and like I didn't eat that bad. Well, I wasn't raised with very much sugar in the house, so I am thankful that I could never like I've never really liked sugar.
Mm,
So like even before I started the program, I wasn't eating sugar because
mm,
I just couldn't really eat sugar. Like it just made me feel like crap.
mm. Well, this is probably a really, it's probably really good that me and you are actually speaking together on a podcast like this, because me and you both follow the same program uh, for a period of years. Obviously
Right.
our programs are slightly different based on our hair patterns, but the basics are pretty much the same. Yet your experience has been drastically different to mine, but at the same time, we both understand the deeper benefits of it. Do you know what I mean? So,
Yeah, I feel like your
um,
experiences are more ethereal.
yeah, I suppose so. I feel, yeah, I feel like that as well. Um, but I think my biggest issue was the fact that I got, I got detachment and brain fog from a really young age, like 14. So when I started coming out of it, 23, I'd pretty much lost the whole of my teenage years. So for me, I was basically trying to, like people sometimes have to relearn certain things when they've been in an accident. Well, it's a similar situation, really. I had to relearn how to relate to the world and stuff.
Right.
Um,
And it's important for you guys to realize that although what Lewis is talking about, like that's very difficult, no other program on earth will like do that. It's hard and you have to slowly train yourself, like he's talking about, to do that. And it's gonna be difficult, but there's not really any sort of like complete program on earth where it allows you to at least do it.
yeah, exactly. There's nothing. Maybe I'll give people a little bit of a backstory about me, I suppose, but
Yeah, go ahead.
in terms of my difficulties and stuff. But yeah, I did get brought up on poor quality food. Um, really poor quality food. Probably, I was living on ready meals, sugar, sweets, candies. There was some now and again. There was some decent things, but I was always a very high achiever.
Was it
Um,
white people food?
Pretty much, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, pretty much as white as me as anything.
yeah, right.
so but yeah, at the same time, I was really kind of big athlete. So I was I was doing semi-professional football at a young age. So I was training 3-4 times a week. I was always entering sports competitions for school. I was running 7-8 miles every other day. Like, so I was basically from a young age, I was, battering my body, but not really replenishing it. And I remember when I was young, actually, I had like, I've always had a chronic ear infection. I always had a chronic ear infection ever since I was around 1 or 2. And from healing on the program and healing the chronic ear infection, I came to realize that my adrenals played a big part in healing up that chronic ear infection. So I know that when I was young, when I was 1-2 years old, I obviously had already at that age some issues with either copper imbalance or some adrenal stress or something along them lines. And even now, even if I have a really stressful week, the infection could come back and then it will go again. So it's all related really to my adrenals and stuff and my adrenal output. So I know that there was obviously something going off when I was younger, and I also had everyone knew me has been a huge sleeper as a young child, which is good. But I would sleep in far a lot longer than my peers. I had a good friend of mine that used to sleep at my house every Friday night, and this kid would sleep 8 hours, 7, 8 hours, and I would sleep 11, 12, 13 hours, which is good. But when you're sleeping that long and waking up feeling groggy at 7, 8, 9, 10 is not a very good sign. I don't think. I don't think you should be waking up feeling like you've been hit by a train when you're a 10-year-old, 11-year-old. So yeah, I ended up getting a job when I was 15, and I think that really affected me massively. And I'm only really starting to understand the reasonings why it affected me so much now. And yeah, basically it was a big shock to me because I was brought up as a bit of a golden child. Do you know what I mean? And thinking that the world laid down to me, and thinking that the world was beautiful and pretty and nice and easy, and I was going to become, some I'd have a good job, an easy job, anything that I want. And I think life hit me very, very hard when I started working at a restaurant, and I realized that actually, no, I'm not the center of the world. Do you know what I mean? So that's really when things started going downhill, when I started feeling detached. And I suppose I didn't want to see the world for what it was. So I started getting a detachment from it. I'm pretty sure it was due to my deficiencies as well, which were playing a role. And I was working 40 hours part time a week, 30 hours part time, finishing at 2, 3, 4 a.m., and then getting up for school in the morning, doing GCSEs. And around 15, 16, I'd started drinking, smoking. I think I even started doing recreational drugs at 16. So 15 is when things started going south, basically. And I started feeling totally disconnected and detached and brain fogged at a young age. And I remember having panic attacks when I was 15, 16. Not panic attacks because I didn't know what was going on, but at the same time, didn't really want to tell my parents because I'd been put on a bit of a pedestal, a bit of a golden boy, and it was quite embarrassing, I suppose, for me to turn around to my parents and say, look, there's something seriously wrong here. I suppose I thought it was a psychological thing. So to cut a long story short, I went to university. I started doing more recreational drugs. I started taking Accutane because I had acne. I thought that I was having depression because of my acne. And later on in life, I realized that acne is probably one of the worst drugs anyone could ever take. It's basically a steroid drug that was a cancer drug, and they realized that it actually cured people from acne. So they switched the branding and switched it to an acne medicine, and it's just basically a pure form of vitamin A that just basically, for a lot of people, ruins the liver, ruins the adrenal glands, ruins the brain, ruins the jaw, ruins the bones. It's just an absolutely terrible drug. And the worst thing about it is the doctors actually didn't prescribe me Accutane. So I can't blame it on the medical industry. I actually bought the drugs online myself because I suppose I wanted it so much to have clear skin at a young age. So yeah, that just kind of got worse and worse and worse. I was actually over exercising to try and make myself feel better, which totally was the wrong thing to do. University was an absolute shambles. I managed to get through it, but I was just completely fogged out. Couldn't have a normal conversation with people. Didn't know what was going off. Just constant confusion. And 21, I was, frantically researching like I always used to research about what was going off. I'd been to quite a few psychiatrists, and they didn't really help me with anything. It was just palming me off. And basically started doing the nutritional balancing program with Dr. Wilson after I read an article on brain fog, and that's when things obviously improved. However, for all those people out there that thinks that healing's just a constant feel good factor, that was not the case for me really at all. But luckily for me, I had the intuition, a bit like you, Luke, to know that I was doing something good. But just for the people out there that want to know kind of what went off, the first 2 weeks I was shaking like a drug addict. For the first 2 weeks, but maybe for the first 3 weeks actually, I was shaking like a drug addict, withdrawing from
That's
sugar.
crazy.
I was sweating most nights. I couldn't sleep. But my brain fog started to lift for the first time in 6 solid years. So the whole of my teens, I had 24/7 brain fog. The only time actually where I didn't have brain fog, and this is interesting, is sometimes when I used to go out, I didn't smoke 24/7, but when I used to go out drinking, I used to usually buy a packet of cigarettes. And when in my first cigarette that I used to smoke, my brain fog lifted, completely went. And later on, when I started to learn more about health and nutrition balancing, I later learned that cadmium shunts copper into the cells. And basically what I was doing, I was taking a hit of cadmium, it was going into my brain, removing all the copper that accumulated into the cells. And I used to get maybe a minute of pure clarity, which I found very strange and interesting. So yeah, they were the only times that I didn't have any brain fog. But so yeah, I had shakes for 3 weeks. I had a lot of trouble with sugar. I remember when I bought my first ever can of sardines. I didn't like sardines, but I remember eating my first can of sardines, and the only feeling that I can express to people, it was as if someone had taken my skull off my head and done an ice bucket challenge over my brain. It was like, whoa, it was literally like nourishment to my brain that I'd not experienced before. It was a really weird sensation, and I think the first 3 cans of sardines I had gave me that sensation. So that was strange. Now the next thing that happened, and this is not to scare anyone off. This is just the truth of my personal experience. And for some people, you'll probably relate. For other people, you'll probably relate more to Luke. So, because I know a lot of people that speak to me who start the program, start complaining about terrible things that are happening. So I just want to express that I've been through, similar experiences. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So, so I was in sympathetic dominance. I must have been in sympathetic dominance for around 5 years. So that's like a constant fight or flight, tensed up, and I did have some energy. And all of a sudden, my scaffolding, my crutches, was taken away from me, and I went into basically severe chronic fatigue. To a point where I couldn't get out of bed. I felt like my eyes were falling out of my eye sockets. I had big bags under my eyes. So this is a shock because I had energy. I had energy to do free running, parkour, football. I had energy to go out drinking, take drugs, etc., etc. But all of a sudden, now I had no energy. So that was interesting. And yeah, that kind of went on for a while. Every month I got better and better, but there was times when I would, be overthinking too much, like far too much. Like literally I felt like I had a beehive in my head, and I had to do meditation to bring me out of that. I had times when my knees would lock into place because I was releasing cadmium from my knee sockets. I had times when I had insomnia because I was removing copper from my system. And then yeah, around 2 years later, I kind of woke up from my brain fog, and I was in Thailand at this time healing because I'd been there for a year to heal. And all of a sudden I woke up completely from my brain fog. My energy started to return. And I was like, oh my God, where have the past 10 years gone from my life? Where the hell have they gone? I've totally lost the past 10 years. And that was a bit of an eye-opener for me. And I was like, whoa, I'm starting to feel all these new sensations again. I remember ringing my parents up and saying, I feel like a 15-year-old again. It's the weirdest sensation because my only reference point of normality was when I was 15. So when I started coming out of the brain fog and the fatigue, I felt like a 15-year-old again. I had the same mentality as a 15-year-old because I'd spent the past 10 years totally disconnected from the truth of who I really was. And then I went through a big, massive copper detox, which Luke knows a lot about because I was ringing him up constantly, telling him that I need help, basically. But so it happens to some people, not everyone. But yeah, for me, I had some intense experiences detoxing copper, sleepless nights. You know, a couple of times when I thought that I was going to lose my life. You know, this is just the truth. It's only happened to a couple of people, but this is just my experience. And it was an intense experience, but I needed to get that karma, I suppose, out of my system that I'd been building up and building up and building up. And that's it, really. I came back to England, and then every week I would work, and from Monday to Friday I'd have my energy, I'd have my clarity, and I'd work. And at the weekends I would detox again because my body was resting. I would detox, and then I'd work again for a week and detox and work and detox. So it kind of went like that, really, for, you know, another 2 years. And I suppose after the 5th year was when I was having constant energy, as long as I was very careful about what I was doing. But Luke knows, again, if I ever took on any more work than I could handle, then I would start burning out again. So I had to learn how to manage my time, manage my energy, kind of see my energy as a bank account, rather than it's just appeared, because it didn't really work like that. I kind of was a bit blind to the fact that although I had energy, my bank account was probably plus £10, you know, instead of plus £10,000. So is that £10 and go into debt again? So
Right.
that's pretty much it, really. You know, I could go into a lot more detail, but I'm going to spare people the time. But
Yeah.
that's basically it.
It's interesting your experience with the sardines. I had a similar experience because I started off in 4 lows, and which is basically extreme. It's basically extreme sympathetic dominance. You know what I mean? And the first 2 nights, the first 2 days, I should say, I took Paramin, that Paramin dosage. I slept 14 hours back to back.
Wow.
So the first night I slept 12 hours, and then in the middle of the day, I took a 2-hour nap. And then the next day, I slept another 12 hours and took another 2-hour nap.
That's crazy.
It felt amazing, actually. It was incredible. I was like, oh, man, it was like probably the best sleep I've ever gotten. Just
Yeah.
just total 12 hours of REM sleep. Just
crazy,
like,
man.
but,
It's probably a similar experience to what I had, but on a smaller scale, whereby you were sleeping beautifully for 12 hours. I was on my back beautifully for 12 months, you know, so
yeah,
probably a smaller scale. But yeah, I remember thinking, oh my God, if I understood what rest was before, now this is complete rest. I couldn't really do anything.
I do
So
believe that, like, so the program works on an energetic level, and it's so reaching a point of health, it gets more difficult the sicker you are. And I do feel that, like, I never quite got there before I started my program. I was never like really sick. You know what I mean? I feel like I was close. I felt like a large part of my life I was kind of riding the line. I could feel intuitively, but I never quite crossed that threshold. Does that make sense?
mm.
Whereas a lot of people have crossed that threshold. Most people don't even realize they've crossed that threshold because the brain fog's so bad. And then to sort of heal themselves, there's a lot more inertia.
This is it. You do not realize the damage because you're so brain fogged. You don't even you have no clue the damage that's going off inside. There's nothing, because you think it's a lot of the time you think it's a mental thing. So you're just
Right.
carrying on. You're just carrying on physically doing the same stuff that you was always doing, you know, and maybe doing some CBT or some psychotherapy that's not really doing anything.
Right. Like I did have a fairly tough home life in a lot of ways, but my mother did take pretty good care of her body when she was pregnant with me, you know, and there wasn't a lot of sugar in my house, even though we did eat a lot of like, you know, kind of like junk food that was like white flour and stuff like that. You know what I mean? There
Mm,
wasn't a lot of sugar, which I also think helped me. Like, I've never been able to eat sugar because she never gave me sugar as a child. So
mm.
my body never learned to metabolize it very well. So I've just never
Oh
liked
wow. Yeah, I mean,
um,
yeah, I mean, I suppose you're lucky in one way. You're lucky. So for me,
right.
it's more of a case of relearning things because I never got brought up in that environment where I suppose my mind was always quite healthy.
Right. Yeah, the biggest thing for
So,
me was that my parents were very abusive towards each other. Like they would fight all the time, like abuse, like physically and emotionally. They would just like kill each other.
mm,
The big thing for me was like I think I developed part of like the cringing posture in order to protect myself from this like external madness, this like
mm,
physical violent energy. And so I think the cringing pot. That's why a lot of my retracings are physical because just it's unwinding of the cringing posture in order to protect myself more as a child.
mm,
Um, so that was a big thing. Another big thing for me was like, you know, trying to find truth. The program let me find truth in spirituality. Like my parents, I kind of grew up Christian, but my parents would use Christianity as a device in their fights. So, for instance, like when they would try to make up, they would pray together, and their prayers were like a tool to point out the flaws in the other person.
yeah.
It was insanity. It's like basically it was insanity.
Sounds like
But
some sort of backhanded prayer, which I don't
right.
know whether that's a good thing to
Uh,
do. I
Luckily,
don't
I
know
did
what.
have my brother. You know, so I was able to. For me, it was good to try to be strong for my brother as much as possible for my younger brother.
Mm,
Um, and I think we helped each other a lot. Just like, you know, we would just go off and play video games when they fought, or like,
mm,
um, so I think we helped each other a lot. But yeah, so for me, a big part was the cringing posture. And then, but like you said, just knowing when I first started the program that intuitively, for me, I've always been pretty intuitive, and I get a feeling when I receive truth. And when I discovered Dr. Wilson's website, I pretty much just got it was truth. But also,
mm,
I was able to do the pushing exercise right away, very powerfully.
mm.
And the moment I was able to do it, I was like, oh, okay, well, obviously, like this is the most powerful thing I've ever done. So obviously, must be something.
Mm.
Like the first time I ever did the pushing exercise, my legs were shaking. Like the nerves weren't used to the energy, and they would shake and
Yeah,
they would convulse with the energy.
similar.
Right. And so from then on, I knew I was like, well, that happened. This can happen. Like I can do this. So this must be truth. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. I think for me, with the whole Christianity thing, spirituality, like I I came from a completely atheist background, completely scientifically minded. So again, like the whole idea of me accepting the idea of God, accepting the idea of spirituality was just like such a not a difficult thing. I suppose it's weird for me because I think there's always been something inside me that's been yearning for a spiritual path, and which is interesting because Dr. Wilson says, a lot of people who are in spiritual defensiveness and who have got things like a calcium shell are actually very spiritual people, even though they don't really understand it yet. So I think deep down I was yearning for that spirituality and that connection
Right.
to a creator
Right.
or a higher self. But I remember the growth, and it was difficult for my brain to wrap my head around it. But
Right.
it's difficult to explain, and I'm sure you've experienced it. Is coincidences started to happen in my life, and for anyone that's on a spiritual path, these coincidences are just it comes to a point where they're no longer coincidences, where there has to be something else involved for these coincidences to come together. It's just absolutely impossible. So there comes a time where I had to say to myself, well, look, these coincidences are just far too weird. There must be something else going off. And luckily for us, I suppose Dr. Wilson, spirituality and about God and stuff, and things like chakras. I remember feeling the energy instantly, literally like the same as you, Luke. When I was doing the meditation exercise, I could feel the energy. I could feel. For me, it was weird. It was like a suction cup. It was the strangest sensation. It was like I can't even explain it. I remember doing it for the first time, and it was as if I had a. Do you know sometimes when you put like a cup over the mouth and you suck the cup, so it sticks to your mouth, and you pull it, and like your face would like suck out into the cup. Well, I had the same experience with this energy, and it was mainly coming from my third eye, just like this sucking sensation, as if like my brain was getting sucked out of a small hole. So that was the first kind of experience with anything remotely energetic. And then I used to feel spinning of vortexes.
But as you heal, you'll realize that your sixth chakra is supposed to go in.
Yeah, that's it. As that was the first ever time when I started to do the meditation practice, so I didn't have any idea what was going off. So it was going out, so it's going, instead of it going down like it should do, for me,
it goes in and
it
down.
it was going in. It should go in and down, but for me, it was like sucking out of my body, like sucking out of my third eye or my crown.
Right.
As if my soul was getting sucked out, which was the weirdest sensation ever. But that was how ungrounded I was. That was how disconnected I was from the earth.
And Lewis is more in tune to these sort of energetic things than I am. I can feel sort of these things, but not on the level Lewis can.
Yeah, and I started feeling the vortexes before I actually read about chakras. So for me, I know that there's the argument of, if you can kind of talk yourself into, you can kind of talk yourself into the whole idea of chakras and what they all are and stuff. But for me, I felt the energy before I actually understood or learned about the energy or read about the energy, because it was very early on in my nutrition balancing. So for me, that's more truth, because it come from direct experience, and then I read about it. So it was like, right, I can understand the two here.
For me, my experience is a little bit different. Like, because I was raised in a more Christian household, I don't know. Like, I always knew the way my parents were was not truth. Like, I had Mormon relatives, and I had my grandparents were Baptist. And I don't know, I always had this, like, I always believed that I always had this, like, spiritual sense, but I always knew that none of this was, like, truth for some reason. I always knew none of it, like, a lot of it was madness, and a lot of it didn't make any sense. Like, there's a lot of truth in all these different sorts of things, but I always knew. And so when I found Dr. Wilson's website, for me, it was like a light bulb turned on. I was like, oh, this is the truth.
Yeah.
And it was like a weight was like lifted, because I don't know, I've always had this feeling that maybe it's arrogant, but I always felt like I was kind of special, and I always felt like there was a higher path for me, and I just hadn't found it. And that's kind of why, like, I stopped going to school when I did, and then I was like searching and searching and searching, and I knew that all these religions weren't really truth, and like a lot of these things I just could feel it. And then when I discovered the website, I was like, oh, this is the truth. And it was amazing. I basically just sat there and read about it for like months and months. I read every single article like 10 times. I read the whole book.
I can't believe you've read. I can't believe you've read. I still can't believe that you've read every single article on their website.
I read most of the articles like 5 or 10 times.
Yeah. I haven't. I think I was so incredibly sick that I could only get one article and read it 20 times. So like I would get my test back and I would see that I was in sympathetic dominance, and I could only go on the computer for maybe 15 minutes. So I would read the same article over and over and over and over again.
And then probably the 3 most powerful things that stood out to me was like experiences like you were talking about. Was one, doing the pushing exercise the first time and feeling the energy like convulse my body with the energy I was able to produce. The second time was when I've been doing the program and the meditation for like maybe like a month. I had a dream, like in dream science, like when you interpret dreams, water represents like spirituality and like potential, I think.
Mm.
And I had a dream where I was in like, it was like I fell out of the air and it's like I discovered truth. I fell out of the air into an ocean and it was just
Yeah.
blue. It was just blue ocean.
I
And I was
discovered
on my
truth.
back. I was on my back in an ocean of blue
Yeah.
and I wasn't scared or anything like that. I was like, I discovered the ether.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And I was just and it was like body temperature water like in Hawaii or something, you know what I mean? Just
Mm.
beautiful crystal clear blue warm water, and I was completely relaxed in the ether and it was like I discovered like just like complete potential.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
was like and then I woke up from that and I was like, wow, like this is I got to follow this path. And then like 3 months into the program, I was meditating very powerfully on the floor of my bathroom while doing a coffee enema. Because when I first started doing coffee enemas, I would do them on the floor in my bathroom.
Mm.
And I felt my heart chakra just like explode out. Just
Mm.
like like my heart.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
It's
I
when
had the same one.
I first started making YouTube videos, and I was like sharing like a lot of like love with people and stuff, and I just like it just exploded. And
Yeah, I had the same sensation. Quite
right,
early on as well, I remember. Quite early on, which was
right. So those
interesting.
three were. But let's go back on track to like pitfalls and stuff people on the program. So I have a lot of young men on the program, and you have to realize that if you are a younger person watching this, especially if you haven't matured in a lot of ways, death of the ego. I see more problems with death of the ego than I see with physical problems with a lot of my clients. So I get
Without a
male
doubt.
clients. And they do they're not quite as sick, I would say, maybe as a large part of the population because they're maybe like they're 16 to like 30 kind of range, and so they still have quite a little bit of energy to work with, you know what I mean, and they do the program very faithfully, even sometimes borderline obsessive compulsive about it. And
Mm.
then all of a sudden the program reaches a threshold where you realize that you were in brain fog this whole time, that you were kind of living a lie this whole time. You believed a lot of lies,
Yep.
and you were arrogant. And it was like the arrogance and your ego was a way to protect yourself in order to stimulate yourself. People don't
Mm.
realize this. Arrogance is a way to stimulate yourself because when you're arrogant, it gives you a sense of superiority. And this sense of superiority lets you drive yourself forward in the world. As I heal, I actually discover, and I actually get better at reading people's energy. I realized that arrogance is the most common sickness on planet Earth. Is
Mm.
arrogance.
I had the
It's,
same thing. I had the same problem as these
right,
young men.
and you
I
can
did
tell,
the program
and
obsessive
you can
compulsive.
right. And as I heal, I can just read people's faces. I can tell by their facial expressions if they're how much arrogance is in them. You
Mm.
know what I mean? And as I heal and I can tune to people better and better, I realize more and more how big of a problem on planet Earth arrogance is. So
Without a doubt.
this is part of the breakdown of the ego that I see, especially in my, like I said, my younger clients. And so this sort of spiritual awakening is a huge shock, right? So imagine you lived your whole life a certain way and you thought a certain way, and then all of a sudden you realize that it was all a lie. This is a
Mm.
huge shock to the whole spiritual system of the body. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's harder. It's hard. In my experience, it's harder than retracing an ear infection or a sinus infection or something. You'll pass through those, but it's not a shock to the system like this is. You know what I mean?
I think the problem is that when you're healing a physical issue, the teleology of the body, the body kind of deals with it in its own wisdom.
Right.
So you get a healing reaction, you get an infection, the body will deal. Yeah, you might feel terrible, but you know that the body's going to take care of the problem. Whereas when the ego starts to break down because of your core beliefs or your core beliefs about yourself or your core beliefs about the world, once you start realizing that that's not true anymore, you are basically forced to come up with a new way of approaching the world and a new way of reacting and being with the world. So
Right.
there's an effort in there that nobody told you about, and that's kind of
Right. Right.
difficult.
So when this happens, it's important to realize that it is happening, and you need to slow down for a while. You need to slow down. You need to do the pushing exercise becomes very important. I would recommend, if you're having this sort of spiritual crisis, do the pushing exercise even more, because it will help you detach from what's happening. But as far as the supplements and stuff, I would slow that down.
Yeah.
It's a shock, and you realize that it's important to be self-aware enough that it's happening, accept that it's happening, and just kind of slow everything down, meditate a lot more, and try to be okay with what's happening. But, take time. I think taking time to yourself can be important. I mean, sometimes friends can help, but most of our friends are in this world at this time are quite depleted and and aren't very helpful. Sometimes family members can help and things like that, or preferably if you're on a program, your practitioner can help you through it.
That's another thing I was going to say. Don't be arrogant enough to think that you know better or you know more than your practitioner, or you can deal with it on your own. Don't get too arrogant enough to think that, yeah, I've done the program now for 8, 9 months, 1 year, 2 years. I'm just going to deal with this myself, and I don't need to say anything to my practitioner. Because that's the wrong way of going about things.
Yeah, and so slowing it down, being okay with what's happening, practicing self-love as much as possible. Like, you have to forgive yourself. It's not your fault that that you were living a lie. You have to be able to forgive yourself for what happened. And it could be very, very difficult, but you'll be much, much wiser and stronger on the other end. I mean, and you'll be able to give out of a more unconditional love towards people instead of a sort of arrogance that most people are sort of exuding.
And humility is a brilliant thing, and it grows.
Yeah.
And it grows while doing the program will bring humility, because it's not just a healing program. It's a life development program, and you will purge, or you will learn to overcome the cardinal sins, I suppose. The cardinal sins, you know what I mean? And that's the whole
the father energy is a tough love, and if you have been arrogant, the program and the pushing exercise will strip you naked before the creator. You know what I mean?
Agreed.
So it's important to realize that this can happen, not just these sort of physical retracings that happen to most people, but many people undergo. And this is especially true, if many people were damaged at a young age. This is especially true for women that have been raped, or people that were part of cults, people that were physically beaten and things like that. The damage is even worse, and to unwind it, it's going to be a spiritual crisis. You know what I mean?
And it's a lesson in self-love as well. Self-love is just an important part of doing the program, and self-love's difficult, man. Self-love is is as difficult, if not more difficult, than when I first started the program. Because when you have abandoned your inner child for so many years, literally from the minute you was born, in a way, you've been abandoning that truth, you've been abandoning that innocence, you've been abandoning that humility. Do you know what I mean? You've been abandoning that contentment, that self-love that you had when you was a child, and you replaced it by all the fears of the world, all the anxieties of the world, the traumas that you've had with upbringings, spankings, rapes. Do you know what I mean? And relearning, relearning how to reconnect with yourself, how to reconnect with your inner values and inner truths, is a process within itself. So all these can be crises and difficulties when you're doing a nutritional balancing program. It's not necessarily, reteaching the body how to run on vegetables and stuff. It's also crises spiritually and emotionally, to do with your own self-worth and other factors. So all these can play a part in the healing, which is
And it's important to realize, to be honest, that the program doesn't always feel good, and it doesn't feel good oftentimes for extended periods of time. If you're 40, 50 years old and you start a program and you've been smoking pot and doing stuff this whole time, if you've been arrogant this whole time and you've been living untruth this whole time with whatever it may be in your life, and then the program it's a special kind of suffering. It is making you suffer towards your greater development, but the program will make you suffer. You know what I mean? And so that's important to understand. But it's still, you have to let go of victimhood too, and realize that it is on you. And the reason why the program is making you suffer is because you need to suffer for what you've done.
I agree. And I've called this title the difficulties when healing in nutritional balancing science, and I've put a quotation marks around the difficulties word, because they're not really difficulties, they're positive difficulties. You can have a negative difficulty in your life which is purely negative, and but there are difficulties that are positive, just like there's positive stresses when you're doing the program, and these can come in healing reactions where it stresses the body, but it's in a very positive way. But I'm just going to stop you, Luke, because I don't think we really was expecting it too much, but we've got a few questions from people. So
okay, cool.
Yeah, maybe we can answer them before these people go offline.
Yeah.
And then we can get back to it. All right, cool. So maybe you want to answer this one from Organic Rose, who I think connected with me on Instagram. And she's put, I'd love to hear you guys talk about fears and overcoming them. Currently experiencing this, mostly fears related to not having enough money for basic needs and my supplements, too exhausted to work.
That is a very valid fear. Money, it represents survival at its most basic level. You know what I mean? And so if you look at like the hierarchy of needs, your first need is food, water, shelter. And in our society, food, water, shelter is represented by money, because you need money for food, water, shelter. If you have, first of all, I recommend that you learn about money. Okay, many people are secretly scared of money because they don't understand it. For me, I read a lot. I've read a lot about money, so I feel like I understand it at its most basic level. Now, you may or not be able to understand money at its most basic level, depending on how sick you are. But I think learning about money is important. There's lots of YouTube channels. Dave Ramsey is excellent on YouTube. Learning how to set a budget is very powerful. I also would say that at this time, when you first start healing, and especially at this time on Earth, it's very important that you contract everything. So if you can live with a family or a relative and just rent a room, just try to make everything as cheap and simple as possible at this time while you heal and save.
Yeah, I agree with
that. As much as possible. Like for me, when I first started healing, I moved in with my grandmother, and it was pretty cheap rent because she's my grandma and she didn't want to charge me much. And it's a small room, and the room kind of became my living space. But I knew that if I could just save as much money as possible on expenses and everything, that I could use more of those resources towards healing, like you're talking about. So I would say try to condense everything as much as possible. If you have family members or friends that even have rooms that you can live very cheaply, try to live as cheaply as possible. Try to look for opportunities to live with people, perhaps do trades, hey, I'll clean your house if I can rent a room. I can take part of my rent off, things like that. Try to condense it as much as possible and try to live as cheaply as possible, especially in the beginning, so you can focus as much as possible on healing. That would be my number one thing. My number two thing would, like I said, would be learning about money. Learn how to set a budget, like a weekly or a monthly budget, so you can track your expenses, how much you're going to need, and how much you're going to be able to put into your savings. Like I said, people like Dave Ramsey are excellent. He's more of a Southern Christian sort of perspective on that stuff. If you're able to understand it enough, I mean, I personally do read stuff on like Austrian economics, understanding like inherent qualities of money and what makes money money. Um, that helped me a lot, just to understand the concept of currency and money and things like that. But those would be my two major recommendations: is bring everything together, live as cheaply as possible, look for opportunities to live as cheaply as possible, and then learn about money and setting a budget. And then I guess third would be praying about it, praying for abundance in your life and letting the angels and the Father energy know that you want to do a program and that you want to heal, and that you need that in your life. And usually opportunities will present themselves.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can vouch for that.
Right. And so just praying about it and meditating on it and trying to allow abundance into your life. And then also that kind of goes hand in hand. The third thing would be, realizing that you deserve abundance in your life. Many people have negative. So many of the young people I'm around have negative attitudes about money. How money is evil, or money or rich people are evil, or money is so hard to come by, and things like that. Letting go of false ideas about money is very important too. Realizing that there is abundance on earth, realizing that you deserve money, and like I said, praying about it, so that opportunities can come to you. Those would be my three major things.
Cool. Yeah, I would have probably said the exact same, really. Simplify, simplify, simplify. Pray.
Right.
If you start a nutritional balancing program, you put out a very, very strong intention to heal. Things will just appear to you in your life that you just was not expecting whatsoever. And you can only really put it down to divine intervention, which is strange coming from a previous atheist, but that's my experience with healing, because I've been in similar situations to you. And yeah, that's. I mean, there's other things like, if you're struggling to eat organic, you can still eat fresh. If you're really, really tight, even canned vegetables. There was times when I was so down on money that I was only eating like canned vegetables, frozen vegetables, and having like one supplement per day, one set of supplements per day, and I still healed. I wouldn't recommend it, obviously, but I was in a position where I didn't have much money at all, so that's what I had to do, but I still healed. So don't like over stress about it, that you need to do everything perfectly and spend loads of money in the beginning, because that's not usually the case. But
Yeah, and you
overcome.
can eat. Yeah, and you can eat pretty cheaply, and many other, especially the younger people, just waste a lot of money on going to movies and video games and stuff like that. I don't know if that's true in your case, but that can be a thing too. Is looking at the things that you're spending money on that you don't necessarily need to spend money on.
Okay, Yuval. I am EMF sensitive with sleeping problems, depression, acne, hallucinations, and multiple other problems. And I've tried basically every other doctor in my area. Nothing has helped. So
You want to take that one?
well, yeah, the good news is I've been in a similar position with EMF sensitivity, to a point where I had to sleep in an aluminium Faraday cage for 6 months. So I understand the problems with EMF sensitivity, and the problem is that a lot of people talk about it, and the reason why they don't talk about it is because they don't understand it. They don't understand what's going off with themselves. They don't understand what's going off with their environment and stuff. And people don't have a proper healing program that really gets to the root cause of EMF sensitivity problems. Now, it's important to realize that EMF frequencies in the environment have increased, probably by thousands of a percent. So it's actually very unnatural for a human to experience EMF. Hold on a minute. EMF frequencies like we're doing today. But a lot of people cannot feel the effects of EMF sensitivity. So I would advise that there is a certain level of health where it doesn't affect you, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't stay away from them. But in terms of depression and acne and hallucinations, I had similar issues. And for me, the biggest problem was the heavy metals, especially the copper toxicity, that was really putting me in a deep depression. And the copper was acting like an antennae for the EMF frequencies, so it was amplifying all the symptoms by a lot. And copper, we all know already from our experience with nutritional balancing, is that also is related to acne and skin problems. And hallucinations are also related to copper imbalance and some other heavy metals as well. We know that when copper gets really high, people get schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, hallucinations. So from the small array of health problems that you've kind of listed, from my experience and from our experience, I would probably put money on the fact that copper is a leading problem in your specific case. So if you are wanting to start a program with us, then obviously get in touch. We've done a couple of videos on EMF sensitivity if you want to have a look at them, which will talk more deeper into the problem. But the way to heal it is basically to first get away from these sensitivities, to start a nutritional balancing program, to rebalance the minerals, to make the cells more permeable so the frequencies can pass through much easier, and to basically get the copper and the heavy metals out of the system, which is a lot more difficult than people realize. And there's a lot of chelation therapies out there and a lot of protocols that people have been on that they don't actually seem to get the heavy metals out at all, and not very well if they do, and the body's energy takes a big hit. Nutritional balancing for me seems to be the only kind of one that's really safe and reliable. So it's something that you should definitely look into. Doctors obviously have got no idea about EMF sensitivity and would probably more likely send you to a psychiatrist than anyone that's got any idea about what EMF sensitivity actually is. So that's probably my tips, really. Get away from it and try and start a program, basically.
Any other questions?
Did you have eye floaters, and did they go away? My eye floaters are awful.
I don't have eye floaters, no.
So yeah, I had eye floaters, but it wasn't the biggest symptom for me. I had far more worrying issues, like the burnout was a big one for me, and I had visual snow. But I did have eye floaters, and they went, and I'd realised that they was related to the liver. So when the liver's congested, it seems to affect the eye circulation. And I've noticed that when I do try to approach people that have had eye floaters, they are by far the most defensive people, and who tell me that I'm totally talking rubbish and I've totally not healed it. So out of all the people, you know what I mean, where I give people advice based on my own experience, talking to people who have eye floaters just cannot possibly get it into their heads that I've managed to reduce them. And one interesting thing that I've found, especially with people who have eye floaters, is that they always tell me that it's placebo effect. Now, how you can not imagine something stuck in the front of your eye, to me, how can that be a placebo? Because that means that I must have see-through vision. Do you understand what I mean? If I have a big block of black lump in my vision, then there's no way for me to have a placebo effect, because physically I cannot see certain
Well, I'm sure
things
there's a psychological cause, but I don't think placebo is the right word.
Yeah, I think people were saying that I didn't heal my floaters. My floaters are still there, but my brain was not picking them up. But I find that difficult because these floaters were big. They covered my vision. So, but
yeah, and you realize that to a certain extent, you're never gonna know the root cause of a lot of your problems. But luckily, the program will heal them in time at their own pace when it wants to, regardless of what it is.
Mm, mm. And when I used to drink alcohol, the floaters would reappear. And if I had a sleepless night, my floaters would reappear. So I did speak to Dr. Wilson about it, and he mentioned that it was to do with the liver. And if you look into Chinese
That's funny. I was
medicine,
just about to say that I was feeling like liver.
yeah, if you look into Chinese medicine, the liver's closely connected with the eyes. And anyone that has jaundice gets yellow vision as well. So we know that the liver has a big effect upon the eyes. But yeah, definitely a liver problem. So the coffee enemas really helped, and the sauna therapy, and obviously detoxing a lot of the heavy metals there in there.
Right.
Um, that's it really for the questions.
All right, so going back to difficulties on the program, we've kind of touched on these sort of spiritual aspects, like breakdown in the ego and stuff that many people experience. Um, you reliving traumas is kind of similar to this. If you experience bad traumas, you'll have to retrace these things,
Mm,
and the process is still kind of the same. Maybe having to slow down the program, doing the pushing exercise more, trying to just witness what happened to you, and being okay with it, forgiving yourself. It's kind of an interesting duality because it's important that you forgive yourself, yet you have to let go that you're a victim of it. So
mm,
but you'll kind of, as you heal, you'll sort of find this middle path automatically, I think, as you do the pushing exercise. Um, but it's also important to realize that a lot of physical things happen too. Like we talked about retracing ear infections. People will have panic attacks. Um, Metals and chemicals will be stored in the body. Okay. And then as you heal, they will be released and they can cause heart palpitations and things like that. One of the most powerful things that I think people forget to do, and I'm guilty of this as well, is when these things are happening, is foot reflexology. So, if you're going through a spiritual crisis or you're retracing sort of trauma or having a panic attack or anything like that, rub the feet, okay? Rub any sore spots on the top of the foot. That's very important. Twisting and popping the toes and rubbing the top of the toes is very important that people overlook, including myself, is rubbing the tops of the toes, okay?
mm,
That can be very helpful to help slow down panic attacks.
mm,
Because
mm.
these do happen to some people in the program. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's important to realize that these things do happen. But like I said, the physical things, in my opinion, are easier because your body will kind of eliminate them on its own. But it's important even when you retrace these physical things, keep in touch with your practitioner. We use a lot of different stuff. Like a lot of people don't know about mega dosing vitamin A. Most people think of when they're sick, they want to mega dose vitamin C, but mega dosing vitamin A is very powerful. It's much more yang. It's not as toxic as people think it is. Doctors will tell you that taking the dosage that we like is toxic. It's toxic if you take it for like a month straight, but you can take up to like 100,000 IU of vitamin A for 2 weeks straight and you're fine, especially if you're an
Mm,
adult.
mm,
Children, you want to take proportionally less depending on their body weight, but sometimes taking more limb or if you're on zinc, switching to limb for a time can definitely help. Doing more short sauna sessions. So when you're sick and you're retracing like an infection, it's better that you do like a lot of short sauna sessions instead of a couple longer ones. That can be very
mm,
powerful. Shining an infrared light bulb on your thymus gland can be good. And just lots and lots of rest, just lots of laying in bed,
mm,
simple diet, you know,
mm. Yeah,
organic soup, things like that. But
I have the same experience really.
neti
Um,
pot can help for sinus infections, things like that.
I think getting out for a good walk can sometimes help. It just detaches you a little bit from the experience, and if you can walk barefoot somewhere, it's really good. Drinking more water, especially distilled water, which is just pure and fresh and cleans out the system. Um, Sometimes if you're going through really intense kind of detox reactions, you need to be a little bit wise and a little bit careful about using saunas and enemas, because an enema can actually make things worse, but at the same time it can make things better. So I would say that if you're going through a very intense detoxification, it's probably a good idea to stop the supplements first, because you know that when you're stopping the supplements, you're going to start slowing things down properly. But just feel your way into the situation a little bit. Maybe have half a teaspoon of coffee, and see whether you're feeling better or whether you're feeling worse. If you start feeling better, then it might be safe for you to do another enema. If you start feeling worse, probably a good idea to not do any more for a while. And the sauna again. If you're going for a bit of copper detox, I would probably recommend to reduce the sauna time. But for people that have got some experience in healing reactions and stuff, and you can get a feel for how things are. If you can take things like extra TMG and stuff to start pushing you through the process quicker, which can help a lot, and well, that's always really good. But it's so important to ask your practitioner, because how you might think one thing is going to work for your particular healing reaction, but when we have a look at your hair tests and we have a look at your history, some things might not work too good. I remember when I moved into follows around 3 years back, I thought that I knew the program quite well, and I started getting really depressed. And usually that's what happens when you're healing 4 lows. You literally shut down the adrenals in order to rest and rebuild. But I started taking some thyroid vitamins and Megapan to try and pull me out of the depression. But I later learned, mainly through learning more about the program and becoming a practitioner, that's definitely not the thing to do. And it actually made my insomnia worse, and it made me even more anxious and stuff. So it's so important not to think that you understand the program well enough. And I suppose me and Luke also have the ability to contact Dr. Wilson, and we also have people that help us out as well, that also have a lot of knowledge in case anything goes wrong for people.
Yeah, it's okay. You have to realize that it's okay to lean on those that are more experienced than you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and and the practitioners, we do it because when we have the experience, we like helping people in a way, but we know more about the program and stuff. And don't be afraid to just drop us an email or drop us a phone call if anything's going wrong.
Yeah, and
Sure, we'll be able to guide you through things.
Right, and it's okay to slow down your program a little bit. Me and Lewis talked about this earlier before we started the podcast, I think, that the program's not life. You know what I mean? So there's been times where I've been tired of my program and I've drank more coffee than I should have. You know what I mean? I probably still drink more coffee than I should have when I need to get a lot of work done. You know what I mean? But I'm always moving forward, on the program. And it's important when we talk about like being intuitive about like feeling that the program is moving you forward. You know what I mean? As you meditate and you become more in tune to your body, you realize that the program is almost like a motion. The program is like a path, and you can feel yourself moving forward on the path. And then the retracings become like a signpost on the path.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So this feeling of forward movement is very important, and this will happen. You'll become more in tune to this as you heal, I feel, and especially doing the pushing exercise. But it's okay to slow down your program sometimes. You just hop right back on it. Even me, I don't do my program 100%.
You'll always fail at some point, whether you'll go out with your friends and drink a lot of alcohol or do something or eat a pizza. It's probably going to happen. In fact, most definitely it's going to happen, because we're not, we're still learning about things. We're feeling sorry for ourselves. We're in victim mentality. But don't pull yourself down about it. And if anything, it's a fantastic reference point. I mean, I don't know about you, Luke, but when I used to drink alcohol when I was younger, it used to take me 5-6 days to recover. Now, If I go out and have some drink now, I don't have an hangover anymore. So that just goes to show you the improvement that you've made, and it's a good reference point. You know what I mean? And it's not
Right.
something to kind of pull yourself up about,
Right.
but kind of,
And I think people panic too much when they cheat on the program. It's like, dude, it's like if you cheat on a night or even a couple of days, like all those metals you eliminated don't all of a sudden come rushing back into your body the moment you stop. Like it's more like you are on the path and then you just kind of paused a little bit.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
it becomes more difficult to truly go backwards.
It's difficult, and I'll tell people about my experience that I'm going through now a little bit. I'm 6 years on the program, and last month I actually went into 4 lows. Now, a lot of people will probably think, well, why are you going into 4 lows 6 years down the line? But going into 4 lows on a retest is a very positive and a bit of a celebration pattern. But whenever anyone's in 4 lows, they're feeling quite down, they're feeling quite sorry for themselves. But always, every time that I've gone into 4 lows, it's always been a new shift in the direction of my life. And in this particular one, it's forcing me to reevaluate what I find truly meaningful. So my work has served me very well for the past 2 years because it's allowed the flexibility in my life. However, the 4 lows pattern is forcing me to change and to say to myself, the meaning is not there anymore. I find other things much more meaningful, and I can feel the program guiding me towards this more meaningful way of life. Now, it couldn't have done that to me 2 or 3 years ago because I didn't have the energy to take risks. I didn't have the energy to make the transition into a more meaningful life. So I wasn't in 4 lows 2 or 3 years ago. I was content and I was happy, and the path was right for me to be doing the job that I did and to be healing at the same time. But now it's got to a point where I'm back into 4 lows again because I'm literally retracing all the layers of adaptions, and I'm just coming to a more honest layer with inside myself. And it's forcing me to change things about my life, you know. And that's the beauty and that's the power of it. And although I wake up some mornings and I'm feeling a bit depressed, I know that it's a good thing. I know that I'm moving forward and I'm moving in a different direction. And I know that in a few months' time, I'm going to look back on this particular 4 lows pattern and realize that that was the pattern where I learned about new areas of my life and where I wanted to go and which direction I want to go. And I made the changes to do it. So, nutrition balancing is a long-term thing. You need to see the bigger picture. It's a marathon and not a sprint. I know Luke's done a video on that. And just kind of balance your life in a way whereby you learn about nutrition balancing and you do it and it's part of your life. Make it your life. Do you know what I mean? Don't get obsessed by it in a certain way. Just kind of flow with it and go out, meet good quality friends, do certain things that you enjoy. Basically live your life in a wholesome fashion, but think long term. Nutritional balancing isn't something that you want to be doing for 2 or 3 years and then you're going to package it up and throw it away and move on with your life again. It's something that's going to guide you through your life in a much more honest way, and that's the power of it, I suppose.
Right. It's like we said, the program's not life, but as you heal and you develop more and more, it will guide your life. You know what I mean? And then it doesn't become a struggle to do things. It's like, oh, I should probably like this habit doesn't really, it's not really fulfilling me anymore. You know what I mean? This habit or these friends or this job is not, it's not really suiting me anymore. And then you just walk away from it and just, that's not part of your life anymore. But, um, but yeah, sometimes people can focus too much on the program. I think that's probably people more guilty of that in the beginning too, is because they really want to
They
heal.
want to heal,
Yeah,
you
they
want
want
to heal. You probably do things, you probably do too many enemas in the beginning that you should do. You should probably take the sauna for too long, and people can hit it hard. The program is powerful, and you've got to realize just to take it steady and take it slow, because if you hit it hard and you start retracing something, it can be quite overwhelming to a point where you can actually become re-traumatized, and that's not something that you really want to be dealing with. So take it steady, take it easy, integrate it into your life. I know it's so difficult to be wanting to do things 100 mile an hour in order to get better quicker, but the saying "too much of the good thing" is definitely true. So take it easy. But yeah, we've gone over an hour now. There's a few questions that's been added, so maybe we can answer them and wrap things up.
Okay.
Cool. All right. So this is probably one for you. Have you guys been getting more infections like colds and flus since you were on the program?
No, I've retraced, like I said, 3 or 4, but I haven't really. I don't really hardly ever get sick.
Yeah, this is the difference, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a strange thing to people. Like if I tell people, like when I'm retracing, it seems that I'm sick, and if I tell family members, like they'll be like, oh, you're sick, and I'm like, no, I'm retracing. Like, oh, you're sick. So it's like it's a hard concept for, I would say, most of the population to understand, this sort of retracing. You're better off not even explaining it to people. I just tell people that I'm sick. Really, like coworkers and stuff, I just like, oh, I'm not feeling good. Like really explaining it to the mass majority of people and making them understand it, especially when their brains aren't working very well and they can't really understand those concepts.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's not even worth. It's like wasted breath. So but no, I mean, I don't really, even when you're retracing, I can usually like power through it and still like get some work done. Very rarely when I'm retracing an infection is it completely debilitating. You know what I mean? And as if you become more in tune with yourself, you'll realize it's retracing, like, because you can feel it coming on. But so it's kind of a difficult question to answer. But no, I don't feel like I get sick near as often.
Yeah, I suppose like before I started the program, my body was so low in energy, in vitality underneath, that I never got sick. I never got sick, although my body was very, very sick, if you understand what I mean.
Right.
So whenever a virus got to me, I would never process it properly. So it would just stick there and I would just live my normal life. And I remember always looking at my cousins who lived in a very healthy family, and they was in clean environments, and they used to get sick quite a lot. And I used to think that they was in a worse position than me. But I realized that their reaction, their immune system was much more powerful than mine was, so they could kind of overcome the problems much quicker. But when I started the program, I did start to feel sicker more, but that wasn't because I was getting sick. I was retracing all the old infections that had been piling up. So that's something to be aware of. I suppose it can make a lot of people stop the program, which is a shame, really, but that's the truth of things. Any tips for chronic derealization?
Chronic what?
Depersonalization.
What do you mean by that?
I think I did a video on it. Depersonalization and derealization.
What is that?
I've been suffering with it for 3 months now, and nothing seems to be helping. And is copper toxicity / adrenal burnout related to depersonalization? I'm desperate to figure out what's going on.
What do you mean?
All right, so depersonalization, derealization is when you do not feel connected to the world around you. So you feel detached from the world. So that's derealization. You're not in reality. You're in a sort of derealization. So depersonalization is basically just a symptom of derealization, whereby when you don't feel connected to the world, your personality is no longer integrated into the world. So your true personality is not flourishing because you have no connection. You have no connection to reality anymore.
Right. That is an interesting thing because as you develop, the program will actually cause this more and more, but it's in a healthy way. You know what I mean? The pushing exercise and development will actually cause disattachment from the world in a certain way, but it's a healthy detachment. You know what I mean? That's part of your development. Now, what you're experiencing most likely isn't that. What you're experiencing is it's a way for your body to deal with the stress of the outside world. So the world is too much, and then the only way for you to cope with the world is to depersonalize it and not be attached to it, and just fog it out. So it's because it's too much. That's actually what things like antidepressants do. All antidepressants do is what you're describing. It makes the world depersonalized, so you don't have to deal with it. And then eventually, if you go off of antidepressants, you'll have to deal with the world again. You know what I mean?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if this person tuned in from since the beginning, but if you watch this podcast from the beginning, you'll listen to the section where I speak about my experiences. And for 10 years, I actually experienced this problem that you've got for 10 solid years. So I did a video on it on our YouTube channel that you can have a look at. But usually derealization and depersonalization is built up in layers, different layers, a little bit to the sickness of the body. So you would have things like hyperglycemia as a layer, so you need to balance your blood sugar. Then you would have things like copper toxicity, which is causing a detachment and a derealization. Then you would have things like parasites and gut problems because of a weak immune system and a weak adrenal problem. Then you've got adrenal fatigue that's going to be causing a detachment and a fogginess from reality. And then you've got all the other heavy metals in there, like lead and aluminium, which causes a bit of a forgetful, foggy feeling. Mercury, which is a disconnection from reality. Manganese, which can make you feel a little bit, crazy. So one of the reasons why derealization, depersonalization is so difficult to quote unquote cure is literally because there's all these layers involved. And I had to go through each layer one by one before I actually, finally came out of it. I remember Candida was actually a big one for me because Candida sits on the brain. It kind of grows in the brain quite a lot, and that caused a lot of detachment and derealization. I had Candida chronically, I think, for the past 23 years. So that was quite a big one for me to get rid of. And I think copper was a big part of it. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's it really. Just people, or maybe a question about the liver flushers. Did you about the eye flutters? Did you do anything other than nutritional balancing for liver flushers? Yeah, I did a liver flush. Dr. Wilson does recommend a particular gallbladder flush on his website. It got rid of a few liver stones. Well, it got rid of a lot of liver stones actually, but it does kind of put a lot of tension on the adrenal glands. So, maybe 1 or 2 in the first year is okay, but it's not really going to completely eradicate the eye flutters, I don't think. Yeah, I think that's it really. I don't know if you're listening, if you've got any more questions, then quickly pop them in the live chat box. But we'll probably try and wrap things up.
Yeah, we've been going for a while now, but yeah, if you guys have any questions, you can comment down below, and then we'll try to get to them next time we do a podcast or a Q&A session or something like that. That would be good. But I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast, and some of our experiences were valuable towards you. And healing isn't easy, and it's important to understand the difficulties that can happen and why they're happening and what you can do about them. But
all right, cool. Well, yeah, I think we'll leave it at there. As Luke said, if you've got any problems, get in touch. We're always here to answer questions and stuff. And I think probably the next podcast will be a Q&A because I think it's quite enjoyable. And there's a lot of things that me and Luke probably forgot on our program, and I think questions managed to bring them out. So probably in the next Q&A, we'll write down all the questions that we've been asked and put them in the comments box, and then do a full Q&A.
all right, see you guys later.
See you later, guys.